Welcome, folks, to People for People Radio with Santos for the next couple of hours, and hopefully it will be as weeks where I'll be let's hope. It's pretty strong in Mexico. So thanks for joining us. Please be sure to support the station in any way possible. Get the word around and help support the radio by spreading and having more support, donations, etc. And it's a great platform for getting the truth out and for the great work that needs to be done as things are rolling out. So this is the heart of Britain, where everything is secretized, so that we are able this beautiful mathematical conscious universe and to be able to advance and descend in every way possible. So all the modalities and protocols and all the great ancient teachings, etc., are here. And I'm very, very happy to be able to introduce my guest today, whom I met in Beverly Hills at, I forget the exact name of the place. Micah will be able to help me on this when he comes in. So, but I actually saw his workshop, and I understand a lot about what's coming up and the healing effects. And Micah treated my left arm, which is my intense guitar arm that plays the fretboard of my flamenco guitar, which I've been professionally playing for 20 years, and that's where all the memory and muscle tension was, and Micah released that. So I've met Micah, and it was wonderful, very illuminating. So I'm happy to introduce, I've actually forgotten how to, Michananda, there you go. Micah, welcome.
Thank you for having me. Aloha.
Yeah. Aloha. So, your work obviously is very impressive, brother, and how you learnt all this about what you call stroma. I love that term, and how you are able to release this by massage. So I don't know whether you want to talk directly about that or things like geopolitical first. I'm going to leave it open to you because I know what you're doing, and I can jump in if I've got a particular question. So is it okay if I just let you go for it?
Yes, that sounds good, actually. And you know, I'm excited. We got a lot to get into today. There's a lot going on, and I would love to cover all aspects that's relevant to, you know, global perspective, planetary perspective, intergalactic or interdimensional perspective, and then the celestial side of it. And I got my own for you, sir. In terms of the astrological side, I have some curiosities I look forward to exploring in that regard, and what's in the stars and the sky in the midst of all this. I apologize for the loud sound in the background. Here in Kauai, they have a set lawn and landscaping things just finishing, so I apologize for that background noise initially, but it sounds like it's just kind of tapered off. But yeah, I have some goals, some focuses in our exploration today. Obviously, number one being about immunity and also education for humanity, because I believe this entire global you and I share some intel, so I'm excited to kind of explore and reflect with you upon and share that with the community, with the tribe, as we're sharing knowledge and wisdom with each other, because knowledge is power. And I think that one of the foundation principles is that because of the lack knowledge or self-knowledge about health and wellness for the masses, I see it as one of the primary driving catalysts for why everything is shut down. Because if you have just even a basic understanding of bacteria and immunology, virology, microbiology, you would not be affected by the psychopathy of what's taking place. And at some point, I'm sure we can touch base on, the ritualistic side of what's going on, and those that control the world are very ritualistic and very based in ritual. And this has been, one of the first stages in a ritual, which is isolation. And consenting to the ritual is really key for all of us. So your power to consent, whether it's even just internal, if you're going along with things like I have to still wear a mask to go get food right now from a couple of the health food stores that we have here on our island, and of course with an island with only 38 cases, we are still shut down with masks, and there's subtle openings, but we're a democratically controlled state, so you can kind of, again, and there's so many things to cover, but you can just see in the split of democratic states being shut down and Republican states being more open, there's just something going on a higher level internally in the power structure right now that is very obvious. And obviously there's been a bipartisan, dynamic and pressure for a long time, but there's a build right now and a split. So even here, and California is a great example. The 33 million people, I believe, seasonal flu kills around 6,000 people a year. Total supposed cases right now is around 2,000. That's 1/3 of a normal seasonal flu or virus that we, California continues to be shut down. In the clinic that I work at, is still open and operating, but I haven't gone back there, and that's primarily because I still don't feel like we've seen the peak of what this event and PSYOP is. And, it's interesting doing a podcast with you because, after 9/11, there was a lot of truth radio underground news networks that popped up, and Alex Jones was one of those, and Oracle Broadcasting was actually ranked second behind Alex Jones, and they were a geopolitical network with I think over 18 to 20 shows, and I came on as a guest for health and wellness and spiritual sciences on one of the broadcasts, and eventually they offered me my own show, which I had called Esoteric Action Radio, and for 3 years, every Sunday for 3 hours, I covered the esoteric, and ironically, a lot of the things that are being talked about today, whether it's underground military bases or just the process of false flags or PSYOPs or everything that's coming up right now, the child trafficking, harvesting organs and adrenochrome and all these elements, we were covering for 3 years, and the level of preparation to do a 3-hour show each week was a lot. So, but it was magic, and I've saved a lot of the broadcasts. I'm actually going to re-release them because they're just so relevant. But it's been very interesting studying for something for upwards of 16, 17 years to watch the progressive dynamic into kind of the next PSYOP, so to speak, the next psychopathy, which instead of it just being images bombarded of a plane hitting a building on TV, now you have a more advanced technological interface and you have social media platforms, newsfeed platforms, social platforms where you can bombard people with, a very controlled source of information and imagery, and the psychopathy it's just an interesting thing to even understand that word. Like, it gets into every crevice of your existence, how you wash your hands, how you interact with people, how you generally go through your day, whether you realize or not. And I'm going to say that I definitely had my own lighter version of the psychopathy, just because my partner is pregnant and would be in a higher demographic for what this was initially introduced to be. And it was from the Intel networks I set up over the 3 years of having my radio show that are still there, that I got some intel that broke the psychopathy for me, and instantly I felt this liberation and this exposure of like a magic trick that was being done where I figured it out, and it's broken ever since, really. And that's before the progression of it into where it's at, where we're having to be forced to wear these masks, which we can touch base on from a medical standpoint at some point, that they do not in any way block viral transmission and impair the breathing, and even the WHO recently has come out and said that the masks don't do anything. But so why are we still wearing these masks? If the WHO even has released it doesn't actually prevent, the supposed transmission of this, is because there's something else deeper that's going on. So it's just kind of throwing out like a present tense, localized dynamic. I want to bring it back, obviously, and introduce who I am and a little bit of myself so that your listeners, know a source of perspective. And I think we'll touch base on that at some point. That really has been an aspect of cognitive dissonance that's been used, is everyone is doubting individuals unless they are quote-unquote experts. So what is an expert, honestly? What do we define as an expert in something? Most of the time it's defined by an occult schooling certification establishment from a university, which universities were originally only the elite were allowed to go into universities. So, and it's been established by so many people, including, not that I totally hold his perspective ironclad, but Elon Musk has even talked recently about how universities and colleges are for fun, but they're not really for learning, and they've kind of warped into that format to some degree. But myself, I was educated and blessed to have a lot of apprenticeships with masters and doctors and neurological specialists, and did have training in the healing arts, and got licensed and certified in 6 modalities, and then certified in other ones. I'm a licensed reflexologist, and I think that's where I can kind of enter in the path. My story came from a path of having to heal thyself. I played sports in school and injured myself, and was looking for modalities in the process of wanting to learn body work. I always knew I had a connection to the healing arts, and my mom used to massage me before I'd go to sleep every night. So touch was actually integrated for me in my life, let's say a lot more than somebody else in the Western world, because, and we're going to get to this leading into this topic, that touch is one of the more alienated things for the human experience. And there are very natural divine processes that the human being can experience. One would be dancing, singing, stretching, running, walking, sitting, pooping. These are basic mechanical functions of having a human body, a human organism, organic machine. And so touch, and the concept of touch, both self-palpitation and the touch between two humans, is actually a primary function that the body requires, like brushing your teeth, like oral hygiene. Your body accumulates chemical memory, it accumulates stress, it accumulates trauma. So, and I want to give props to Christopher Lee Maurer, who in his book Free for Life, which I recommend, it's a great story about how the body accumulates trauma, and the bigger picture journey of what it is to release and heal that trauma. If it's accumulated for decades, it's not going to be done in a quick or even deep, powerful session or series of sessions. It's going to be done in a progressive effort to undo what's been accumulated in you, that I believe is one of the greatest enslavements to humanity, which is that we weren't taught how our body worked, and that our body was designed to be touched, not as an option, not just as a form of affection. So let's identify 3 forms of touch. There's a romantic touch, going into the realms of tantra or sexuality touch between 2 individuals, that's intimacy touch. There is a general loving touch for humanity. And then another form of touch which has not really been clearly identified for humanity, which is what I call medicine touch. And that is touch with the specific intention to palpate or to move or to stimulate or to flush tissue. And this has lost awareness because no one's been taught that your little Lincoln Logs, your little Your cells are like little Legos, and they fit together, and there's a grain to how they fit together, and they're designed to contract and expand in your entire life since you're a baby, where you start as a little baby blob. And as a little baby blob, you're kind of, as a soul, just settling into the physical body. And what does life tell you? It says, pull yourself together. So we start compressing an egoic identification into our tissue that becomes this compressed form of the human side of the human being. And it settles into this compression because every time you physically move, you release a chemical called acetylcholine, and that's the primary chemical for movement. And every time you feel something, you release neuropeptides from your brain or neurochemicals that make you feel happy or make you feel sad. And so this chemical release is a daily process, kind of like your teeth accumulating bacteria. And as we know, and it's commonly understood throughout the world, even if you don't do it, that if you don't brush your teeth every day, you get a big bacterial accumulation that collects, and you collect tartar on the enamel of your teeth, and that tartar eventually turns into plaque, which hardens and starts eating away the enamel, eventually the bacteria getting into the dentin of the teeth, and thus you get cavities. Or you get bacteria collecting between the gums and the teeth, and then inflames the gums, and we get gingivitis, which is actually a better reference for what happens with your body, because teeth are dense and hard, but the gums are a porous tissue like the body's tissue. It's a spongy tissue, it's a layered connective tissue, and that tissue can get infected. And so that's really what happens with your body when you accumulate chemical memory every day and you don't release it. It starts, because that's the thing, is it actually sits in the tissue waiting for you to move it, which I thought when I was in anatomy and physiology training in school, I thought was, a horrible design flaw. What's going on with the divine engineer here? Why doesn't this stuff just flush and make room for the next activity and next emotion and next experience? Well, then I had one of my first epiphanies around bodywork, and another one was around homeopathy, which we're going to touch base on in a minute. And that epiphany was based around that this was the divine engineer or the creator of the vehicle's way to initiate contact and initiate accountability for all of the physical and emotional experiences that you have by building a interconnected relationship with witnessing that they're accumulating and that you actually are containing the experiences of your day and that they need to be flushed and drained out of your body. And if they're not, they actually sit in the tissue, and then you release the next wave of chemicals the next day, and it begins collecting in the tissue. It collects in the muscle tissue through lactic acid, and then also every time you use your muscles, you create these tiny micro tears, these micro abrasions, and the natural response of the muscle is to release protein into these fibrous bundles, and that protein is like a glue that fills the tears, and your body expects that you're going to massage this glue while it's wet, like glue is wet, and when you first, squeeze it out of the bottle, and eventually if that glue is not moved, then the glue hardens, and then the next round of glue gets released from the next day, and the next round of tears, and then you have another layer of glue that collects on top of that, and so on. You start collecting these layers of this protein that starts hardening, and as you move the muscle in continual movements that are repetitive, you start shoveling this protein into piles, which is what you call a knot, or a deposit of protein for practitioners that we break up for you. So you can massage this protein, but kind of like plaque that's accumulated on your teeth. If I was a dentist, would it do anything to massage the plaque on your teeth? No. So I would scrape it off. So deeper forms of structural body work on breaking up and scraping out the proteins out of the muscle fibers so that they can then heal. But the older they are, the harder and denser and tougher they are. Now, you have a second level of accumulation that's happening, well, technically third. Let's include that the nerves also release chemicals to make you feel and activate the muscles, which are doing the activities and the tears and the protein releasing. So those nerves release those chemicals. Those chemicals sit all along the nerve ending. So imagine when you do something like pick up a glass, there's electricity that squirts a chemical down your nerves to your muscles to tell it to do that task. Pick up the glass. So after the chemicals release in the nerves, they actually also need to be activated and moved, or those chemicals sit in the nerves. The chemicals become rancid. They have an acidic base. They start eating away the two co-proteins of the nerve endings, and that's why we start getting numbness in our arms, and that's why our nerves start degenerating, and all disease is caused at its root from neural degeneration. So that's, let's say, the primary layer of chemical processing and trauma stress. Then you have that second layer is going to be the muscle tears and the protein process that needs to be flushed. The third is going to be the myofascial webbing, which is going to be a surface layer above that that's like this hyperconductive web of strands that they're now finding also send impulses from the nervous system, so it's like another nervous system. But what this myofascial webbing does is it collects, it accumulates every day, and I always use this metaphor like a pond where algae grows over the surface of the pond, and eventually, if that algae gets too out of control, it blocks all the light to go into the life of the pond for all of the flora and the fish that are in the water. And eventually the ecosystem of the pond dies because the algae grows over and blocks the light out and suffocates it. And that's similar to what happens with the myofascial webbing as it accumulates. It suffocates, so to speak, the muscles and the tissue underneath, because it's designed to actually collect in areas that you stress. But if you were to grip the front of your shirt and bunch it up and hold it tight like somebody was grabbing your shirt, and then try that, you do that with one arm, and then try lifting your other arm, you'll feel that there's a pull now on your shirt from the area where all that tissue has been clenched together in the fist of your other hand. And that's how the fascial webbing system works, is once you start collecting myofascial webbing, it starts impinging the other webbing in the other areas of, imagine like a bodysuit. It impinges it from moving, and so that starts collecting more and more, because it's actually designed to be broken up every day by this medicine touch that we've talked about. So along my journey, going through the different modalities of the healing sciences, I came across a man who had uncovered the base principles of this work. He had worked with Ida Rolf before she started a school, and he liked the concept of structural integration and this deep work, but he noticed that they didn't really address the nerves, which to him was the wiring and the intelligence circuitry of the biological computer. And he didn't like the draggy, frictiony strokes with Rolfing and structural integration. He felt it was counterintuitive to the rest of the tissue reacting and tensing, which I myself as a patient have found with Rolfing and structural integration. So he kind of came up with like a very primitive form of almost a series of deeper presses with a light press in between, like a sewing machine kind of perforating the tissue, working along and across the tissue. And then he found a base understanding of mapping the nervous system in the primary junctions, where he could stimulate by almost strumming like a guitar string to stimulate bioelectricity, which by firing those nerves, you're kind of hot wiring your circuit. So imagine those nerves fire electricity to shoot out the chemicals to tell you to physically do stuff and feel things. So if you just kind of do a manufactured stimulation of these nerves, they fire electricity, but you haven't performed a task and you're not feeling anything. So you're kind of just firing them, and the firing of them is like lighting up the train car tracks of a trolley that's kind of stopped at a stop because it's not getting electrified anymore, and that would be the chemicals sitting from all the things you've done and felt that are now just sitting in the tissue. When you fire the nerves, you're lighting them up and pushing that stuff out. It kind of pushes them along the tracks, if you will, into the bloodstream, which is the sewage system, and it filters out of the body. So he was actually my neighbor, and I was in school at the time learning the basic systems of body work and massage therapy, Swedish massage, shiatsu, Thai massage, and I was in the process of becoming a reflexologist, which deals with the nerves in the hands and feet. So I had a lot of training around this. And so I had a torn ACL from playing football, and one of my shoulders was warped out of the socket, and my hips were pronated. And, one day he came over and saw my massage table, and he said, oh, I see you do massage. I've been working with this system. I kind of been figuring out, I haven't really done much with it, but I could fix that knee for you and this and that. So I disregarded him at first, but eventually we became friends, and I let him work on me. And in a matter of minutes, not only did he reset my shoulder, but the muscles around my shoulder, and for the next so many weeks I had to learn how to reuse my shoulder in the proper position, and also come to the awareness that it had been out for whoever knows how many years. And I had gotten accustomed to it being out. It was normal. My warped frame had become normal, and I can't tell you how many people I see whose frames are warped out, people that we see on TV that we think are icons of beauty, that if I analyze their anatomy, you can see where their body is warped in different ways. And they're generally warped to two different positions that I've seen. And one I call the slave, which is a collapsed chest. The stomach is distended, and they're breathing primarily from their belly, which sadly is supported by misteachings of breath work, whether with singing or different things. Just because you do that breath work with singing or with martial arts or something where you're breathing into the dantian, doesn't mean that you do that breath work when you're walking around in your day. Those are specific practices with that breath. The breath that you're supposed to be inhaling in the way the human body was designed to inhale, if you look from a structural engineering standpoint, is to inhale first into the upper respiratory and then the lower respiratory, which includes a tiny bit of an expansion from the abdomen, but primarily the upper chest is supposed to be lifting, which is not comfortable to do if your chest is collapsed because you've been conditioned into a warped posture, which, like I said, would be the slave, which is your average human. Then you have a lot of the male populace, which is warped into what I call the gladiator, which is where their chest is still collapsed in, but their shoulders are kind of pulled back. And you see this with a lot of models. And their stomach is pulled in, but in a way that's tense. It's not their posturing. It's not natural from their breath, because the actual natural way to breathe looks more like how a dancer would walk and stand, which we actually think looks kind of weird. But that's because our perspective is so skewed, and the conditioning from the deep state, the deep is so deep that you don't realize in how many ways your entire reality is controlled to the perception or the ignorance of how not to live in a more divine form of the embodiment of what it is to be a human being, which is two words, human and a being being the higher form of yourself. So I call them the divine basic functions. There are all the divine basic functions, from chewing to breathing to sitting, walking, eating, pooping, and also how to have sex, sexuality, the art of Tantra and sexuality, and activating higher centers of the body using the true embodiment of circulating the tantric energy. All these basic functions have not been taught to humanity. We have been handed down intergenerationally more ignorant forms of this from what in the study I do with human design, would be based around seven-centered humans, which most of our cultural systems have been formed around, which is human beings pre-1891, when humanity had its last mutation that happened in the frontal cortex of the brain. And we're supposed to have another mutation in 2027, because, at least from the human design perspective, humanity is looked at as something called Homo sapiens intransitus, which is a mutative form of the organism that's been evolving and mutating for 90 plus thousand years, at least from human design perspective, from cellular bacteria here in this carbon-based reality, which, if you look 250,000 years ago, it appears the entire planet was incinerated and was a silicon-based planet, realm, whatever you want to call it, pre this incineration, and all the carbon along with the surviving organisms reformulated a carbon-based reality. And in fact, whether you're sitting next to somebody on a bus, interacting with them, shaking their hand, kissing them, if their elementals were formulated from silicon-based as opposed to carbon-based, you really wouldn't be able to tell for a human being the difference, because it's about the elemental periodic makeup of your atomic and biochemical structure. So it's an element. It's a base element. So I find that fascinating that we're now carbon-based, and also something that's not talked about a lot in the scientific community, it's kind of an underground, dirty little secret nobody talks about, is that the carbon decay rate of matter has been accelerating for a number of years. It started accelerating, and what does that mean? Well, the carbon decay rate of matter is how we actually relate to everything. Physics, time, space, everything is based off how we gauge the carbon decay rate of all matter. And it's been accelerating, and it's been continuing to accelerate, which they don't want to talk about because that means they have to reformulate a lot of things that science has been structured around. And in my understanding, that's because we're about to close a photonic cycle where all matter is light that's been slowed down so much it becomes polarized, and in that polarization, magnetically, atoms are drawn together into a physical form from light. So from the ancient cultures, and I'm actually curious to get your take on this, Santos, that they're saying, I've seen some information that the Mayan calendar is actually 8 years off. So what would have been 2012 is actually 2020. But even from that standpoint, there's a photonic cycle that happens where it's like all matter completes the cycle. And if you look at what happens when you slow a photon down to become matter, is it gets slowed down to where it has a cycle, a beginning and an end, and the matter attaches to it for that cycle, but as it closes, then everything goes back to light. And so that's a very interesting, metaphysical concept for the fact that, time itself is supposedly accelerating, and that every minute of every hour of every day, there's still the intervals, we're counting them right now, but they're getting shorter progressively. And that's why people will say, wow, it feels like just this whole year went by faster than last. Well, from this standpoint of the carbon decay rate of matter, it is. And it's continuing progressively towards what appears to be a dimensional shift where time-space turns to space-time. And, there's so many layers to what that actually means. But one that's been described that's very interesting is that in where I see the patterning, and that's where I find truth is in patterning, is that when your human cells split, they make a carbon copy of themselves. And that this whole realm or planet or whatever you want to call it is in a process of making a carbon copy dimensionally of itself to a higher density, and then there's what continues on in the dimension that doesn't shift into the cell split dimensionally. And your choices, and I think even down to the moment when there is a final division moment where cells split. And you could look at that kind of as a judgment day, and then it could be as simple as just choosing to be in your heart and in love rather than in fear, despite what's appearing to go on in the simulation around you. So I would love to hear your thoughts on this. I just want to kind of close up the story of me. So I started working. So put a little footnote in that. I started working with this man. He helped me regenerate my ACL of my knee. Which is unheard of to Western medicine. One of the doctors I met with who said, I'm going to have surgery on my ACL. So it regenerated itself with this work, and I began, I asked him to train me. He said he really didn't have a way to train me because he hadn't really developed it, so he would just work on me. So I worked with him for over a decade, and I extrapolated, so to speak, the principles and the techniques of what he was doing along with my anatomy and physiology training, and began developing the system that now is NMRT, neuromuscular release therapy. And that's just what I call it in this time. In my research, I've seen it surface through several ancient civilizations, and it's been lost. And the last one I believe it existed in was actually in ancient China around the time of martial arts. I believe there was a martial art version of it that I believe is the closest one that I've brought back through. And I say that because there is a lineage of this work that is in Tantra that's its own thing that in my study and research goes back to Egypt and Samaria. And the true times of Eden, which would be going back to the Anunnaki. So it was lost out of all the ancient sciences, and it came back through as a fractalized form with this man, and then I cultivated it back into the form that it is today. It's helped thousands of people over the last last 20 years, including myself, to regenerate the body from extreme injury and compromise by healing thyself, truly by unlocking your Lincoln logs, your little Lego parts, cross-laterally, which as it unlocks them, it flushes fresh blood and oxygen to the tissue. It activates the nerves and the circuitry of the nerves, which I look at as, excuse me, kind of the user of the computer. So we'll call it like an app in your organic computer that I call the iPhysician, or has been termed recently the iJedi. We've been doing a conceptual thing where we're going to take people on what we call iJedi training retreats, where we show them how to incorporate the Trinity of Health and Wellness, which is another one of my focus points I want to touch base on at some point. Because everyone talks about immunity, but to me they're only focusing on one pillar of the Trinity of Health and Wellness, and these other ones are just implemental to this time period. They were given to us as kind of like chapters in an instruction manual for this organic machine, and nobody's gotten to read the instruction manual. So I'm actually writing a book right now called The Instruction Manual for the Human Body that has a culmination of the different spiritual sciences and ancient systems that are aligned with the physiology and the science behind your body, the biochemistry, and what it does. For instance, with the yogic sciences, even just a small amount of breath work, it's been scientifically proven to literally activate the batteries of your cells. And again, for those that aren't familiar, because one of our focuses is education and just the basics, your cells are batteries. You have a nucleus and you have a cytoplasm. The nucleus is acidic, the cytoplasm is alkaline, it's separated by a membrane wall. I mean, that is the recipe for a battery. So each one of your cells is a battery, and it's been proven that just doing even a few minutes of this practice, that the body, from my study, is what I call one of the divine origin sciences. That is a practice that seems to activate a deeper physiological engineering of the body to turn on to an optimal level. So it means that there's a divinity in that it's reflected in the practices, how it activates the engineering of the body in a very specific way that appears to be designed or engineered for that purpose. So that's part of what the Trinity in Health and Wellness is about. And so NMRT was a big part of that, because although I call it NMRT, it's basically the principle of unlocking your cellular units and waking up this inner physician, this inner healer, to do a scan of the system and fix itself, which is the principle of homeopathy. Arnica does not remove swelling from the body. I used to think, I was raised on homeopathic remedies and thought arnica, I would take arnica to reduce the swelling. No, arnica actually increases the swelling, and it's designed that way so your own body goes, oh, I should fix that, and it starts fixing it itself. And that is the principle of homeopathy. All homeopathics agitate the symptom so that the body turns around and fixes it. And when you really understand this principle, you should understand that the body's not getting fixed by anything. Even the body's reaction to a vaccine, the body has to react to, the inner physician has to react to this manufactured or controlled strain of genetic coding or bacterial coding, and along with all the toxins and things, which doesn't make sense why you would initiate that, because the body has its own ability to do that without doing that. In fact, if you needed vaccines, there should be a little vaccine packet that comes in the placenta when a baby's born, and those are the ones it's supposed to have. There isn't. So that's because the system was designed perfect, and it's part of the God complex of humanity to think that there's some way they need to better the design, which is really in and of itself throwing a middle finger up to the divine engineer who created it by saying, no, this needs this extra stuff. Now, I'm not saying that there isn't and hasn't been a significance for a legitimate vaccination, potentially, hypothetically, that wouldn't have all that crap in it, or the MCR5 fetal bacterial cell line from the 1960s in it. Okay, if it doesn't have that stuff, and they're just introducing a foreign bacteria, so to speak, I mean, that's what an antibiotic is, actually. And at some point, we should touch base on the fact that the latest findings from Italy, where they actually rebelled and did an autopsy on some of the bodies, they actually found all of the blood was coagulated in the body, and they've actually discovered that this is actually a bacterium, not a virus. It's a bacteria that attacks the capillaries, the artery, the veins, and attacks the heart and the lungs. And that and this is just something that I learned about recently, but it's a go-to for many doctors and homeopathic practitioners, naturopaths, it's called chloride dioxine. And that it's basically kind of it's a medical form of like a bleach, basically. And a lot of doctors have spoken about if they go to third world countries over, they'll take it, and they are unfazed by bacteria in the water and stuff like that. So another doctor was speaking about it, and he had always disregarded it, and then he got really sick and tried it, and it just totally healed him. So we're not really. Either way, we're not coming up with a solution that's based or talking about immunity. We're still talking about pharmacological treatment even. Instead of none of these health experts that are the public representatives are talking about the importance of immunity and a healthy immune system and how to make this naturally just advanced organic machine, if you really understand the body, how to actually just operate at an optimal level, because the reality is, folks, that you are coming in contact with bacterias and viruses all of the time. And just from the statistics I've shared, that even for California at least, a number of casualties or deaths is a third of what a seasonal flu would be. So you're seeing another version of an exposure to something. Now, is there potential for, with a combination of technological bombardment of RF frequencies, whether it's 18 or 6 gigahertz, that actually basically expand the cell walls to allow for more viruses to get in you? It basically opens your sponge of cells, so to speak. And then the natural lack of health and wellness for our overall people. I mean, we were ranked 35th in the world for health and wellness. I mean, 35th. There were third world countries that were healthier than us. So that can be a dangerous combination. But the answer is not to stay unhealthy and then treat yourself with vaccines or pharmacological resources, unless you are past the point of being able to build your immune system, because your system is so off or so shut off. So bringing it back around to my journey over the last 20 years, I developed and cultivated NMRT, the ability and understanding to unlock the tissue. It has been a source, the self-treatment form, to heal myself of several injuries and to be in a healthier state at 41 than I was at 25, and helping lots of people from their 20s to their 60s, 70s, how to get their body and their system back online, because there is a process to turning it back on. And that has been again, through the process of cultivating this work, we started a feature-length documentary called Release, which is about the power of touch. And I was trying to come up with a subtle way to introduce neuromuscular release therapy, to me, a very threatening awareness and teaching to the system, because they're wanting you to not wake your system up and get healthy and build immunity. They're wanting to have you be codependent to their system. And so I wanted to introduce it in a subtle way, so we decided to focus on the principal aspect that touch is alienated in almost every culture and country throughout the planet. Even cultures that aren't as bad as the U.S., there's still an alienation, and there's a lack of awareness around what medicine touch is. And even myself, in my experience with a mother who massaged me every night before I go to sleep, there was a point past puberty where it was like affected, like touch was weird for her, like she would put her arm around me for so long, it felt controlled. And probably because my sexual energy was activating, and for some reason we've sexualized intimacy and contact. And part of that is, a lot of these deep programs, like Don't Talk to Strangers in America. This isn't your fellow countryman. This could be some psycho that's going to kill you. And there's been an alienation to touch, which again, from my research and study, is purposeful. If a people are less touched and contacting, they're less united, they're easier to control. So let's skip ahead. I mean, we have over 600 hours of footage, and we're about 3/4 of the way through the movie, and we took a pause on it, but look at the world today. We are the most anti-touch and alienated to contact that we've ever been. And it's really a trip to keep filming because it's such a strange twist in our documentary that was already just felt globally relevant to focus and expose the lack of touch and why we're so alienated to touch, to see that if you understand more than just the mainstream narrative, and that this was done purposefully, and you look at deeper layers like humans being alienated to an extreme around touch, it was already set in motion. In fact, here's a really interesting reflection of a lack of touch. Tickling, or the word ticklish, this is a made-up word. It should not exist. A body that is well stimulated and all the memory and tension is released out of it consistently, if you had learned how to do this to yourself and do this to each other and your family, and it was integrated into our cultures, you would not be ticklish. In fact, I'm not ticklish anymore. My kids will try to tickle me. It just feels good what they're doing, but there isn't a reaction to being stimulated, even intensely, because that reaction comes from tissue that's been overly full and has this sensitivity to it. And it's almost like we had to come up with a word to describe what was happening to people as they were being alienated from touch intergenerationally over decades. Was this kind of, some of the deep state programming is gradual over time. It's been done so subtly. Another one, we're alienated to our bodies, to our smells, to our scents. We think, especially in America, people have been so bombarded with fragrances growing up with them that they've actually gotten oversensitized and alienated to their own smell. And you'll see this culturally with a woman or even a guy who'll be like, oh, don't smell me, I stink, babe, I've been at the gym, or I stink, and it's like, actually, or we make, you've seen a common joke in the U.S. about Europeans are stinky. Well, that's actually, the joke's kind of on the Western world, because the Europeans don't smell anything because they grew up accepting their scent and not being alienated by fragrances that alienated them from their own scent, and they don't smell anything. We're oversensitized and we're alienated to our own scent as a form of accepting our divinity. Another one, which is a whole topic in and of itself, is neuropathy. And the fact that your body is so brilliantly designed, it actually produces a medicine that has all the antibodies in it for anything that's wrong with you. COVID-19, boom. If it's a real thing, you have antibodies for it, and it is in a substance that you produce along with all of the nutrition from your food that you couldn't bioabsorb. It's fully synthesized and ready to go into your bloodstream, and you produce it and you waste it, because we've also been conditioned that we're gross. Look at the phrase gross anatomy. We're gross. You're gross. Your body's gross. Your smells are gross. Your fluids are gross. In the ancient occult magics and in the ancient sciences, your saliva, your menstrual blood, your urine, your blood is sacred and super, super protected because it has your energy frequency in it. And so you would never want someone, you would never spit in somebody's face as an insult, which is an association we have. In fact, saliva has your DNA and your energy frequency, and actually someone can hone in on you specifically, energetically, and affect you through having any of this information of your coding, so to speak. So we've been alienated that all these things are just gross things, and we're gross. And unfortunately, because we've become a very unhealthy and toxic species, we are kind of gross. In fact, when I speak about uropathy and this medicine that you make, it is your urine, in fact. Shocker. See, it's weird for me understanding the knowledge of the body and the physiology and how the system and the machine works, that it's weirder for me that it's weird for everyone else. Because I've broken through the programming and the psychopathy process of the gross thing, that I'm gross. Now, I have something I do for patients that I call the 24-hour pee challenge, the 24-hour urine challenge, where I actually challenge you to drink your urine, and within 24 hours, to drink the next cycle. And the first one of the day has the most nutrients, most antibodies in it. It's definitely the strongest because your body's been processing all day. Okay, but to me, it's not any stronger than a vitamin B shot or drinking some wheatgrass, which, people do all kinds of things for health and wellness, In fact, we have an association that medicine or something healthy for us is supposed to taste good. So break that belief system, because actually, I've always learned that the best medicines are really strong and pungent. If anyone's ever had ayahuasca, it is a very intense thing. It gets burnt into your sense memory. Okay, same with Wachuma or any shamanic medicines that I've worked with. And I did open onto a path as a shamanic practitioner from neuromuscular release therapy and working with plant medicines, which I'm happy to get into some point if it's of interest. But bringing it back around to the medicine you produce, when you try this the first time, you will be grossed out. And primarily it's because you're gross. You're imbalanced, and you're going to taste all that. You're going to taste high levels of sodium, maybe trace metals. It doesn't taste good. You're tasting everything that's off. But by giving it to your chemistry lab, you're creating a biofeedback loop by giving it back to the chemistry lab. It gets to analyze everything that's off. And the next day when you drink it, I guarantee you, it's going to taste different. It's going to taste different, like not gross. Like you'll identify it and you'll see the things lacking from yesterday, because within 24 hours your system is so brilliant that it's been able to completely transform the imbalances and create more of a harmony. Now, this can be built upon by eating different biochemical nutrition and timing this medicine with when the body processes it, because everything it couldn't process from that wheatgrass is going to be bioavailable and go right into the bloodstream. And now, I found this because my friend broke both of his legs, and he got a staph infection, and the antibiotics weren't working, and they were draining a bag of pus every day from his legs, and he found this, and it saved his life. It got up in his nose, too, and so he became a huge advocate. And so out of curiosity, because he shared all the medical information, the medicinal side, the healing side, separate if you were ever sick, what this does, and I was curious. The first time I did it, this was the experience I had, thus, eventually creating the concept of a 24-hour P challenge, because it was so dramatic how different it was, and then learning the science behind it, that within 24 hours it does that. Brilliant. So I also felt like I just got a vitamin B shot. I mean, I was charged. I had so much energy. The electrolytes, it was like, whoa, like, did I just have 12 cups of coffee without the jitteriness? It was amazing. So eventually, ironically, on Kauai, a number of years in here, I unfortunately got staph myself systemically throughout my body. For about 8 months, I had cavernous hole-like sores through my entire body. Shoulders, my back, along my spine, my legs. And I don't know if anyone's ever had staph or MRSA staph, but it feels like there's a dagger stuck into the area of tissue and twisted a little bit right on the nerve. And you wake up with it, and you have it all day long, and you go to sleep with it, and it is there, always. Every moment you are alive, you're waking up, and it's there. And so I tried everything. I tried the antibiotics too, and eventually the uropathy saved my life too. Putting it on the sores, on bandages. I mean, there were times I would saran wrap my back with literally paper towels soaked in urine and sleep with it. And eventually, I not only healed away these cavernous flesh-eating bacteria, but literally erased almost the scar to where there's almost nothing there for a hole that was so big you could see into my spine. So I became the living embodiment of the power of my own medicine and seeing how powerful I am. And that has come time and again through this trinity of health and wellness, which is the yogic sciences and the arts of breath work. Cross-laterally unlocking your tissue, call it NMRT or call it just medicine touch, but from the design of your sacred geometry of how the cells unlock, and biochemical nutrition, what the body biochemically can break down, customized to your biochemistry and your blood type. Now, recently there's been a lot of practitioners, really amazing doctors, giving just amazing tips for immunology, how to build immune system, even protocols for if you're forced to get a vaccine, how to detox it out of your body. And we can go through some of those if you're interested. But one of the primary things I see them talk about is biochemical nutrition, things like monatomic, scalar activated monatomic minerals and ormus supplements, meaning they bombard and they get the actual subatomic level active a scalar wave, like for nascent iodine. That's magical. And amazing biochemical nutrition and quantum healing technology like scalar wave systems or PEMF systems, electromagnetic pulse systems, which are amazing, and they do amazing things, and I've utilized them to help heal my body in so many ways. But they're only really talking about those two. They're talking about biochemical nutrition and potentially quantum healing technology. No one's really talking about the breath, the engineered systems of activating the breath and activating the cellular batteries of the cells and turning them on, which activates the immune system. And nobody's talking about touch and the power and importance of touch, which, like we've established, is a primary service, like brushing your teeth, that the body requires. So by not doing it, you are putting a variant into your equation for health and wellness that will naturally create an undesirable outcome, or an outcome that is not at the highest level it could be, which is why it's so relevant that we establish the necessity for contact and touch. And if that means you're isolated right now, that means you have to come up with an own regimen to activate and touch yourself. And so that's why we are currently working on a 12-video self-treatment system for NMRT, which I originally developed for apprentices, practitioners we would train in the level 1 training for NMRT, which is how to do what we call the spring cleaning, which is the first time we take you through a full resetting of the entire system cross-laterally and the nerves. The thing that we just did a demo on your arm of, we do systematically through the whole system. And the first time you do that is very much like a shamanic rite of passage, which is why I began, cross-pollinating into the shamanic path and working with medicines and things like that and other shamanic practitioners, along with cross-laterally activating the body, because we found naturally by cross-laterally opening the tissue, it enhances the entire body's perception, mind, body, soul, of the shamanic journey or whatever medicine you're looking to go deep and explore and understand. So there was a natural correlation to touch, contact, medicine, touch with medicine ceremony. So there was a whole journey of that brought a lot of ancient understanding of where touch and contact was also lost in even these ancient practices. But the concept of the necessity for you to open your tissue and activate it, that is what really we need to be made aware of. Because the thing is, you go to sleep every night and you're laying there and you're trying to decompress from your day, so it's a perfect place to cross-laterally open up your tissue through this self-treatment system. It will naturally stimulate endorphins, relax you, and help you drop into theta wave sleep, which is the deep healing sleep that you want to get to. Most of us toss and turn, going from alpha, beta, or beta to alpha, and then we will it takes 3 hours to get into REM sleep or theta sleep. Most of us toss and turn and we go in and out of it so we don't feel rested. But that's also because the system is compressed and it's glitchy and it's needing to be decompressed. You could take 5 minutes, you could take 25 minutes, you could take 55 minutes going through your body, cross-laterally opening it, head, shoulders, knees, and toes. There's a whole process we do independent to do this. And obviously people have learned to stretch a little bit before they go to sleep or do a yoga set before they go to sleep. That helps them. I've always done the Kundalini sets as a yogic practitioner before I go to sleep. But the actual sweeping of the entire system while you lay still and you're initiating release and activation on one end but relaxing into it on the other, that creates a different effect than just stretching. I tell you from experience. And so we're working also on like a 60-second animation, like spirit science style, where, because I just feel like I've talked about this for so many years, but I really got this vision that you need to just see a really kind of simple, autonomous look into your body on contact and like a cartoon-like unlock the Legos perspective of how important it is to do this and that touch is. And so we're hoping this animation will go viral and direct and activate people to the self-treatment system to learn it. Because it's all about now how do we get access and work even around algorithms to get truth and awareness out. Because we're in a time of knowledge. You have access to knowledge now. Now it's what will you do with it. You don't have to go hike into the Himalayas to find a yogi to train with. But you do have to now follow through with the disciplines of learning the sciences and the systems with the people you have access to. So I'm going to stop speaking for a moment and allow you to ask anything and field anything. Thank you for letting me flow with that. And again, it's kind of a divine ordinance. I used to try to prepare interviews and things, and now I just kind of collect a bunch of my consciousness I'm intuitively led to, and then it flows out as it's supposed to. So thank you for giving me the floor to share, and I'm open to some Q&A and exploring from here. Where do we navigate?
Great, brother. Thank you so much. That was absolutely comprehensive, exhaustive kind of, panorama look of everything that you do, really. So that was beautiful. And I like that you have such a diverse breadth and spectrum of interests and things, because this is what makes the whole experience rich, and how we can absolutely bring truth to help people in this time, because they're being led astray so much, and it's obviously to us very, very weird, and we can see the whole mechanism just trying to overtake this beautiful conscious world that we're coming into. It's just trying to swallow it, as it always does. It's like a demonic egregore which is, just feeding on itself. And your analogy of the silicon prior to the carbon world, it just makes sense. The Iron Age would be the carbon, which it is, and iron. They go together. And then the last Silicon Age would have been the last, Copper Age, possibly, that drops. And so what happens is it kind of morphs, the form gets degraded, or and now we're in the carbon and sort of graduating back. And it's an amazing opportunity here that we are in, and your very important focus on touch and healing at the cellular level is very, very powerful, because that's where the most intimate of our body is. It's in the cell. It's where you go within and you go to that point in the cell, which is the finest, most ultimate part of you, because it's a fractal of your whole body, and it's the DNA information, you see. So you go into there and you heal it, and you're able to, through touch. And this is why they've got us wearing masks and social distancing, pretty much shut up, because now you're not going to be inclined to talk through that thing, and don't talk and don't touch. And those are our senses, and these are what create beautiful resonance in us for us to be able to heal at the cellular level. So, man, I'm really glad you really touched on all of that. There's so many places I could go from here, forward in the conversation. But I'm going to leave it up to you as well if you want to suggest something. But it'd be great if we could talk about as well how we can do things on every level to prepare ourselves and overcome, prevail over what's potentially trying to install itself in this world. I mean, the UN's already declared that it's a new world order, and I remember as a Jehovah's Witness many years ago, good little Jehovah's Witness, Bible studying, loyal and everything. So I remember them talking about the UN and how they will usher in a new world order. So I've been waiting for Armageddon all my life, really, since I was 6 or 7 or something like that. So
yeah, same with the Mormons too, huh? Same with the Mormons, really.
Yep. Armageddon, Notre Dame, the twilight of the gods, Talion. It's upon us. It's now like defragmenting, everything's going to go into like a chaos mode. But then, I mean, order can come out of that relatively quickly, depending on, how good we are, and how strong we are and powerful. But the chaos must, like the like you said with the Silicon Age, it was combusted or something. You said it just burnt up, and then the Carbon Age came. So it's kind of like that. That's it.
100%. And my action actually is to explore, because such a pivotal part of my life. I mean, October 28th, 2011, one of my best buddies came out to Kauai. We were prepared for what's happening now 8 years ago, and recently I found some intel that, it was 8 years off from 2012, which would make right now. But it was so interesting because I was deep in the radio podcast thing, and it was such a journey for me. And then for it to not happen and be off in the timeline, I continued the show, but then just kind of took a step back from it. So it's been kind of surreal and a head trip to have it now and feel it now upon us, really, really. And to hear about this 8-year kind of offset from the Western astrological system, and I'm wondering if it does have to do with this, the fact that our astronomical in 600 BC, and that the sun's no longer within the constellation of Aries during much of the same period. Like, everything's been pushed off by one sign, supposedly, because everything's relative to the position of the sun relative to the constellations as they appeared more than 2,200 years ago, but it's different now. So I'm curious on your take on that, because they say it has to do with the wobble of the Earth, that it shifts. But I'm curious because 8 is also going to be the number, it's like that's the number of hertz that they've changed music, right? From 440 to 432, 432 to 440, which is actually the single size, they say, of the resonance of the planet. So it's interesting that there is kind of an offshooting of a date, and that's why I guess it's kind of, a lot of things are coming full circle for me. But I'm curious your perspective on that astrologically, for all of us, because I mean, my birthday is March 24th, so I'm right in the cusp of Pisces, Aries anyways. I've always felt kind of a duality of that fire-water, but interesting that it would say that I'm a Pisces from this. And in Vedic, it's, goes from that. So anything you want to share on that, I'd be very curious. I think it's a good starting point.
So what was your birthday?
March 24th.
March 24th?
Yeah. So it's kind of already on the cusp of Aries Pisces, but by Vedic, I'm a Pisces, Yeah,
that's my birthday, man. March 24th.
Yours is too. Get out of here.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
That's your birthday.
That's my birthday, man.
We have the same birthday.
Yeah.
What are the chances? Truly.
I know. So, now that's great, because this is a good subject to touch on. This is very, very important. If you've seen my model of the cosmos, my model is not Copernican. It doesn't incorporate any globe. The only globe or sphere is the apple-shaped toroidal field which surrounds planet Earth that we live on. It's a true astrological model of Ptolemy. Ptolemy described this planet. Hence, that's why it's planet, because it's from the French word, a plane, a plate. That's why we have tectonic plates, right. You see. Right, so what's happening, Micah, is this. This apple, this is a big toroidal field. It's massive. It is called atum. All is atum, according to the Egyptians. And this atom is what you have in your body, hence an anatomy. And your torus is your torso. These words have been inverted, or these are anagrams of each other, because the truth is hiding in the English etymology. Etymology is nothing other than etymology. So I do a lot of this because the atom and the cell, you see, getting to the bottom of your nature, these little fractal atoms, these waveforms, So these are toroidal fields, and the Ptolemaic system describes that the plane of inertia inside every torus field is the planet of Eartha. And above that, we have the planets, so-called, they're wandering stars, going around on the ecliptic, and hence the year is fixed, the tropical year, and hence tropical astrology, based on the seasons always turning up at the right time. The equinox is always on March 21st, the solstice coming up on June the 21st, then the autumnal equinox on September 23rd, then the December winter solstice on December 21st. And this is the cross. These are called the tropical points, and tropical astrology is based on that. So no matter what the sidereal system is doing, this one is more influential in and penetrating in the material world. The sidereal chart is another system which is also working with the tropical system. We have a sidereal minute, we have a tropical minute. We have a sidereal hour, tropical hour. Sidereal day, tropical day. Sidereal year, tropical year. And this is where people are getting confused. Simply put, if you go to an astronomy site, they will tell you where the stars are sidereally. If you go to a tropical astrology site, which is pretty much predominantly 90% of astrology out there, they will tell you where the planets are tropically on the ecliptic. Their position is 4 months who spoke on the two systems. And so in the toroidal field, there is something inbuilt in every torus field, which is called electromagnetic retardation or electromagnetic precession. Voila, there's the word, precession. Precession is inbuilt in all the toroidal fields, and your torso is a torus, and it's red shift, blue shift. Top part of the torso is blue chakra, bottom is red. It's all about red shift, blue shift. Red pill, red blood, blue blood, roses are red, violets are blue, Republicans are red, Democrats are blue, and all of this polarization in the electrical waveform universe.
All coded. Wow.
Exactly, mathematical. It's a mental mathematical construct, and it's beautiful, you know. It's God whom we are in our unlimited state, and then it's us, godlets, droplets of, like drops of ocean water, but they still belong to the ocean, and they still are part of the whole field. So we will never be outside of God, and we will also always be God, but with difference. And this is so beautiful that we are allowed to eternally keep our different individuality from being God as well. And this goes on forever, you know. And so this horrible meltdown of the gods that's happening now, it's all part of the plan of this precessional field, which is sidereal, which works against the tropical system and is out by 5 1/4 days every year. Hence the dome of the heavens does 360 revolutions every year, whereas the sun on the ecliptic takes 365 days and a quarter. It has been slowed down. And you see, this is what happens. Ken Wheeler explains that if you want the secret to anti-gravity and free energy, all you need to do is one thing. Learn how to manipulate the rate of precession, the Lamua frequency of every toroidal atomic field. That's it. That's how anti-gravity works. That's how that is the secret to all magic in the universe. So the cosmocrators and the archons of this universe, when they decided to slow the sun down, which happened 2,700 years ago, 750 years ago, in every culture under the sun, they added these holy days, and this is recorded in history in every culture. So what happened is they changed, like the frequency changes in an atom and it gives over an electron. It's all about slowing down the rate of precession. When it's balanced, it's the golden age. When precession kicks in, which it has been, this has now been making a schizophrenic behaviour system on the Earth, where we've got one biological astrological chart or natural, what I call the natural, which is the tropical, and then you've got the cultural chart, which is the sidereal. And in both systems, there is accuracy, because the planets will always be in the same houses, in both sidereal astrology and tropical astrology. But your point, getting to just quickly finish this so that you, I have exhausted the answer, is that the influence is tropical predominantly. It penetrates much more in this field, material field. But the sidereal must be counted in with all your, astrology understandings, because it has a secondary influence, and there's no doubt about that. I've proven this many, many times. So it's all about, every atom is a Walter Russell explains it as a proton radiating and an electron gravitating. Now, this is not gravity, which is only a theory. This is about radiation and gravitation, the two co-eternal principles of creation. And this is, radiation is redshift at the bottom of torso, torus fields, and blue shift is left-turning centripetal divergent. That's blue shift. Red shift is centrifugal divergent, redshift, radiation, and then it comes back around and flips over, and it goes back into the center of the hyperbole of the torus field as centripetal convergent left turning. And this is how all fields work. So we are an atom, we are atum, all is atum. The sun is atum, hence in the book of Enoch it is called Thomas. And here in Mexico it is called Tonatiuh. And his consort is Tonantzin. I have to stress the ton, because I've been saying this for years. All is a ton. And so, getting back to you now, I'm sure you've got plenty to add to that, Micah. Thank you.
Oh, I'm just actually still absorbing everything that you shared, and I'm so grateful. Thank you for that, because it just adds more to the image that I'm collecting pixels around seeing the bigger picture of, and I feel like that's really, for many of us waking up, what we're doing is, we're collecting pixels as we pull back on an image to see a bigger picture, and your willingness to be open and discerning, but also have no limitations to what pixels might come into the field will reveal the picture more. And I feel like we're greatly, their strategies are so ancient and so effective. Dividing us. There's a great division right now of people waking up from the mainstream narrative and trying to share it with people that are deeply attached and ingrained, entrenched to the mainstream narrative. Many for the reason that they have built relationships over decades with sources that they get their news and their reality perspective from, and to embrace potentially that these are controlled, manipulated for a narrative that they themselves have given into, is such a reality-shattering process that the cognitive dissonance becomes their alternative. And that cognitive dissonance is, I saw a really cool meme, and it's funny. It's with the kid from The Matrix when he's talking to Neo, and the kid goes, "Do not try to teach the Karens the lockdown was a mistake. That's impossible. Instead, only try to realize the truth." And then there's Neo, and he says, "What truth?" "That the lockdown has turned fear into a virtue. Those who are afraid believe they're better people than those who aren't, and will subconsciously look for ways to multiply that fear because it's their virtue." And that is very much what I'm seeing is that's the trickery, that's the psychopathy, is there is now an army of basically kind of SSS reporting civilians now coming under the vise of virtue, ultimately driven by fear, that also to admit that what did Mark Twain say? It's easier to convince a man of a lie than to convince him he's been fooled. And that's because, right? Isn't that what it is?
Yeah.
And it's because there's an egoic identification and attachment to being fooled and having to humble yourself to the fact that you've been fooled. And it's some of the greatest turning points in my life was when that happened for me. So realizing you've been bamboozled can be a very liberating thing, can be very freeing. It's all a matter of perspective and your willingness to let go of identifying so much with it. And how can we truly do that if we are chemically enslaved to the versions of ourself that we've not only concocted from stress and trauma, but have been programmed and conditioned, ultimately with the underlying vibration of fear since we were little, that have seeded into our identity? And we've gotten so identified to because we haven't been releasing as we go, to where even if we experience that programming or that psychopathy, we move it out of ourselves. So we have awareness of it, but not be so entrenched, ingrained, identified to it. And I want to actually transition this to touch base on something that you were just talking about. So we're taking it out to a celestial level of awareness. Is if these electromagnetic vessels, we'll call them planets, planes, whatever, are in certain points, and they're electromagnetic. When you're born, in your electromagnetic field on this electromagnet, if they're in certain positions, and as they move, why would you ever not think they would affect you? As their electromagnetic masses move around, pulling on your magnetosphere, which is tied to the magnetosphere of the planet, or the giant bombardments of electromagnetic radiation from the sun wouldn't affect your magnetosphere as well. And so if we are bioelectric, which we are, and we have circuits, and we've identified those circuits are nerves, can you see how if somebody's not stimulating those circuits and nerves through their whole life, through their childhood, with this type of a cross-lateral activation touch nerve stimulation, and they've accumulated all this chemical memory, also they've accumulated a ton of bioelectricity that's like glitchy in their system, in their circuits, and they've gotten desensitized to it because it's been gradual. I just wanted to touch base on the fact that you're going to have a lot harder of a time through great celestial transits and solar flares and movements and alignments and retrogrades of these planets, because your circuits are already compromised by not being cleaner and running properly. So, even if we were to an astrological level, you're going to be able to align with the more authentic self of astrological processes as opposed to the egoic side. And I'm sure you will acknowledge as an astrologer, even for somebody's birth sign or sun sign, there are gifts and challenges that come with each one. And so if your circuits are compromised, you're going to fall more to the challenges than the gifts to radiate.
Yep, for sure. You won't reach the excellence every time and optimize.
Yeah, you'll be stressed. It'll add to the stress, and it'll progress you into a state of either fear or frustration or anger. And if we're getting blasted with a photonic field that kind of sweeps, and this is actually a question I have for you. I've learned about this photonic belt, this photonic field, and my conceptual understanding was it's kind of like this high photon field that kind of sweeps through and cleans the galaxy, so to speak, or the multiverse.
Yeah.
And it comes through every so often. It comes through and it's been documented from ancient civilizations, and that I'm not sure, I'm still working out the pieces of this part of the puzzle, if it's kind of an alignment period for ascension for those ready to go to higher densities through the cleaning process, and then also great destruction comes for the denser layers that don't shift, and then the whole thing kind of starts all over again until that photonic field sweeps through again every so many 1,000 years.
Yep. This is the dragon's breath that we are going through. It's highly charged. The frequencies are different, you know, that they always are. If you liken every waveform and turn the wave, the sine wave, into a circle, you'll have now a cross in the middle of the circle. This is like the Celtic cross. That's what it is. It's a symbol of atomic science. The O is the circle, and the T is the Tammuz or Tammuz who died on the cross. So this is how light works. It has to be crucified to become a tomb, a tom, an atom. And it gets entombed in matter, you see. That's why your body is in the shape of a T when you extend your arms out horizontally. And so every wave begins moist. There are four humours. Moisture generates heat generates dryness generates cold. So you've got hot and cold, the two active humours in astrology, and then you've got moist and dry, the two passive humours. And so what happens is every wave begins like this. The morning is moist, the afternoon is hot, the evening is dry, the night is cold. The morning is moist, the afternoon is hot. The year. Spring is moist, summer is hot, autumn is dry, and winter is cold. The same you will see with your life cycle, the wave of your whole life. You are moist when you are born, then as you become adolescent you get hot, you heat up as you grow, and then you get dry, you start drying up, getting wrinkly, and then when you are old, you get cold. You see, and it's the same with the four-stroke motor. Moisture begins the cycle, then heat, then dryness, then cold. And every wave is doing this. So now we are coming through the dragon's breath. This is like a golden age. You know, it's a breath. And that's what it is. The universe is breathing. Brahma breathes out 8.5 billion years, and that's one world. And now the breath, the intake, we've come to that equator where everything is now going centripetal convergent. It was centrifugal divergent, redshift, radiating. Now it's gravitating. So it's going back in on itself, you see. It's going back to the centre of the torus field, which is the hyperboloid. So it's very important to know this true model. The atom is a torus field. That's the true model. And as Walter Russell puts it, you know, the plane of inertia, that's the neutron. The proton is the redshift, and the blue shift is the electron. And they are one and the same. They are the twins. Hence, Thomas means twin. Atom means unit. So there's a secret in the name, the most common name of man, St. Thomas, St. Tammuz. It's the atom. And it is the only model that exists. There is no other form. No other form exists. You see? That's why in the Gospel it says, if you have seen me, you have seen the Father. If you've known me, you have known the Father. Because the form is the same as the Spirit. So...
Yeah, and it makes sense. And let me ask you this: since I was a kid, I always had this awareness that my body was not going to die in this incarnation. I had this that my physical body, that in this life my goal was to get my operation capacity so high for my neurokinetics and brain and frontal lobes, that the mind, and scientifically it is possible that if enough of the brain works, it actually learns how to control energy into matter and vice versa. And so you literally, like many masters have been recorded doing, dematerialize, so to speak, out of this density. And I just remember as a kid on the purest level thinking, I just know that's what's going to happen for my body. And it seemed like the highest of forms that has been trailblazed by Christ is to transcend the flesh. And he did say, I have paved the way for you all to take this so much farther. And I always had this awareness of that. So when I discovered that there were records of him studying the yogic sciences in Asia and India, I truly believe that he learned, and is regarded in India as a yogi, he learned how to activate his brain through the breath. And I do think that even a form of holotropic breathing was potentially how he was able to survive the crucifixion even up there for so long with the pain. Because when I broke my ankle recently, I've always done the ice baths like Hadhadi, I love it. It's amazing. And the science behind it is amazing too, that if you go 3 minutes under 32 degrees, it causes the body to reset itself, basically. It activates stem cell production, and when you do the breath with it, it changes you to an alkaline state. You become an internal alchemist, And so what happens is by doing this breath and flooding the body with oxygen and then depleting the body of oxygen, creating hypoxia, you direct the oxygenated blood to the areas that need it the most. And when you're in the cold, the sensation is that of you are all of a sudden and your first minute is the most brutal, but all of a sudden you transcend and plateau into this place of warmth, where you are warm, and they're like, oh, I can go longer. And it's like riding a bike. Something happens, you get it. It's the same when you cross-laterally unlock your tissue with neuromuscular therapy. It's an intuitive thing. There's a recognition, wow, that did something. Like when we treated your arm, you were like, whoa, this is different. You had an intuitive awareness that this did something. It's experiential. There's nothing I can convince you of, because I watched the experience of people processing it as an experience and going, whoa, that just did something. So when I broke my ankle, the calcaneus, I had 2 fractures, which is brutal because your calcaneus is like the worst bone to break because it's your heel bone, and all your weight falls onto your heel. So as it's healing, there's nothing but pressure on it. There's no way there can not be pressure on your ankle at some points through the day if you're going to function and not just lay on a couch all the time. So I would do neuromuscular therapy after the ice, where I would do my ankle every day. And the thing with your body that nobody gets, and this is because we're primarily a pain-avoiding consciousness right now. Being on the planet does anything for one of two things, and anything we can break down to that, right? Gain pleasure. The problem is when you don't unlock and decompress your little Legos over your life, then the tissue's getting inflamed and it starts hurting. To punch, to try as a last-ditch effort, because all of us have been directed more to the left in the logic, the reason, and disconnected from our imagination and our bodies, and feeling more somatically our body, doing body scans, sensation of the body. We're very disconnected. So the pain is the body's desperate attempt to say, hey, stupid, can you deal with this knot in your shoulder? Like, it's been so long. And now it's inflamed to where it's not just a feeling of pressure, it actually hurts and you can't raise your arm as much. So that pain-directed communication, we tend to avoid it, and then it just gets worse and worse. And then ironically, once the nerve is given its last attempt to try to tell you, it will start deadening and numbing out. And that's the trick and the illusion for a lot of people that say, oh, I don't have any pain in my body. Well, that's because a lot of your nerves have shut down and they're just not even, you can't feel anymore, which is actually the worst state they can be in, because then you have to wake them up, and then they'll kind of breathe the dragon's breath fire, and you've got to deal with that inflammation. And then as that cools and releases, then it'll start functioning normal again. but nerves can be woken back up. The problem is that they should never be shut down. And so when they're shut down, it's putting all of us into a state of abstraction from our divinity. Naturally, you're in a state of abstraction. Your body is carrying pain. It should not be carrying. It's affecting the authenticity of who you are now, because you're carrying a fractional perspective of every version of yourself from every year in your consciousness and personality. And each one of those years is less aware than right now. But how can you be here now if you're carrying chemically these other versions of yourself? That's why so many times people try to do spiritual work and they get openings, they get activations, they get awarenesses and an ayahuasca ceremony or somewhere, and then they go back to their old patterning. Why? Because the patterning is in your chemistry, whether it's from being picked on when you were 6 years old, or having a mother who let you speak, voice yourself. It's mutated your filter of consciousness from its divine state. And even if you consciously become aware of it and try to do things about it, if it's in the chemistry, it's going to come back up again. It's going to come back up again from the subconscious. So a lot of our unconscious and subconscious is directed from this chemical illusion. And that chemical illusion is set in each person's computer program of their psyche or their hard drive. So I want you to think that hypothetically, if that program, if that hard drive was bombarded with a bunch of stuff, that the people that put it in there through the television or the television programming have put it in there, and it can range from everything from what you think is beautiful to successful to what clothes you should wear to how your life should be. You go to work, every day and come home to your family and save up to hopefully have retirement later. All that has not only been conditioned into your psyche, but it's held through the chemical memory that's in you, which is why it's so alienating to learn about this stuff. And you can feel the conditioning in you. How do we get it out? Well, you have to dig it out. You have to manually. I've tried everything. I tried the quantum tech, tried doing Reiki energy sessions to clear. It's like, think about it. The third dimension is a slow-moving, transmutative dimension. It's messy. That's why the metaphor for the lotus in the mud is because you're growing out of the mud. And it's not a magic presto changeo wand. That's why for a lot of the New Age community, it is not going to be some presto changeo magic wand and all of a sudden we're in a new dimension. It's going to be messy and progressive, and it's going to test every ounce of our humanity. And, I had a lot of visions of these great earth changes 20 years ago that have guided my journey. And it was literally seeing what I had a high-ranking retired officer from the military come on and confirm from at least the military standpoint was global tsunamis, about 1,000 feet, 12, 13-point earthquakes globally, the entire planet's tectonic plate system. I've been studying its expansion for 20-plus years, including the supervolcano at Yellowstone. And I don't know what it's been that's driven me to be obsessed with the earth and its process and this rebirthing process that's happening, this expansion of the planet that's happening along with the expansion of consciousness, but they are interwoven and tied together. So I feel like it's only natural to want to know what expansion rebirthing the entire planet is that I'm an organism on, that the organism's going through. And so this expansion process is, from what I understand, a dimensional shift comes after the great earth changes, and after we are left on our own for the most part with minimal intergalactic support to get through it and kind of rebuild. And then there's going to be an introduction of technology and an introduction to a galactic community on route towards a dimensional shift. That's what I've always been shown, and that's going to be a process. It's coming, and we're in one right now. I believe it ties into the mutation in 2027. But that process is a process, and it's these spiritual technologies that will be the foundation, that were designed to support you through the process. And that is my focus for humanity to start integrating, and as far as I'm concerned, we're kind of behind schedule because, we're a fairly young culture in the West, and especially in America, we don't really have any ancient spiritual sciences. That's why, I was raised in a family in the Eastern sciences before they were cool. So my parents were married by Yogacharya, one of the last living disciples of Paramahansa Yogananda, and I was raised in the Self-Realization Fellowship and Kriya Yoga before it was cool. In fact, I was ashamed of it, and people would be like, where were your parents? What church were you in? And I'd be like, oh, that one down by the other ones. It wasn't a cool thing. But my parents were led to the Eastern teachings because the West had no cultural, spiritual sciences, and in the 60s, which they were part of that consciousness awakening, was about many people in the West coming to the path of the Eastern sciences. Unfortunately, like anything in the West, the Eastern sciences even become westernized, and gurus have become corrupted by the Western mentality and corruption. The Wetico virus, I'm sure you're aware of that phrase. It's like the spiritual virus work in so it's interesting that we have a materialized, supposedly, version of that right now that's out, that is, now in humanity's forefront of their consciousness and in their psychopathy of fear, and it's basically based down to cooties. Ooh, cooties. Germs, something invisible is going to infect you and get you. And that's another deeply seated program that, it was carried out with STDs, compromising people's sexuality and bringing fear into it, from things many times over that you can see the proof have been manufactured and implemented into our society. So it's been a progressive of that germ psychopathy, the virus psychopathy that you're seeing play out. And the sad thing for me to witness, and many practitioners and medical doctors, is that are going, this is crazy. No, you guys, this isn't how it works. This isn't how microbiology works. Like none of, most doctors or trained practitioners in medicine, we get frustrated that when we try to talk about this stuff on average, but when it's like taking over and shutting down the whole world, and we're going, wait, like, you guys don't understand how microbiology works. You come in contact with millions of viruses. The coronavirus in general is the most common strain of virus in the human body. There's tons of different ones. The one that is being showcased right now is just this mutated one that they discovered in 2019, thus the phrase. But, other than that, it's very common, which is a concerning element around their testing and what they're actually testing for, because your average person can come up positive for having this common virus in their body, and because you don't understand how virology and microbiology works, you're going to think that means something other than it does. Which is why there are tests in like Africa where like a fruit and a goat tested positive for it, because it is a common virus. Bacteria and viruses are all over the place, and you come in contact with them in the goal, just like all humans are exposed to cancer 2 or 3 times in their lifetime. It's just if your civilization of bacteria and viruses, which you are primarily composed of, fights it off, because there's harmony and balance, which comes from a healthy lifestyle, and honoring this trinity of health and wellness that I've found takes it to the next level. So I guess we could say it would be 4 pillars of health and wellness if you included quantum technology separate from the power of touch and activating, decompressing your body, the yogic sciences of breath and physical stretches and asanas and kriyas, and biochemical nutrition. That's going to be your 4 pillars that the foundation of your health and wellness will stand on. And I'm curious to ask you this, actually, Santos. Have you heard of centurions? There's been a record of humans that live for almost, hundreds and hundreds of years through different civilizations. They end up having a different name, but through the correlation of archaeology and scriptures, and you can see it's the same person. Are you familiar with them? Because the human body is supposed to be able to live to be 90 or 900, depending on how it's operated.
Yeah, for sure. You mean people that keep turning up in various stages of history, like Saint Germain and guys like that?
Yeah, and even Thoth is a good example.
Uh-huh. Yeah.
And popped up in Samaria, pops up in Mesopotamia.
Yep. you never were not on this plane. It's a theatre, and you've always been an actor on this theatre, you see. So, and you'll carry the same look, because you see the eyes are a window to the soul, and its countenance are its true form of measuring the soul. You know, the way you look is how your soul is configured. It's, you know, if you look martial, like I guess, and you do, I've seen you, of course, and being born on March the 21st, you will have that iron-like look embodied in your whole biology. It will be in every atom, you see. It's where the sun is. The sun is in Aries, so it's going to amplify that. And Aries is the cerebrospinal system of all the 12 systems in the body. Taurus is the endocrine, Gemini respiratory, Cancer immune, Leo is cardiovascular, circulatory, Virgo is digestion, Scorpio is generation, Libra is the renal and urinary system, Scorpio is the generative system, Sagittarius muscular, Capricorn skeletal, Aquarius is the 12 meridians, and Pisces the integumentary. So, you know, each one, wherever the sun is, they match that archetype, you see. So we are nervous, Syrians are a nervous system, the cerebrospinal nervous system. The motor nerves, the cerebellum, just below the cerebrum. So starting from the top, just go all the way down, and you've got your whole 12 systems. It's an electromagnetic system. Magnetism is how magnetism radiates, electricity vibrates. It's red shift, blue shift, whereas magnetism is white light, and its counterpart of the yin and yang, the black part, is dielectricity. And this is the Holy Trinity. Dielectricity, magnetism, the begotten sun. So Emmanuel is electricity. It's the electrical force of form, which is a vibratory wave, whereas magnetism is a radiation wave. It's longitudinal, it's not transverse. Magnetism is 10 billion times more powerful than electricity, according to Faraday, Maxwell, Steinmetz. They all calculated it around about the same, 10 billion times. Longitudinal wave. So when you do this anti-urine therapy, I believe both are very important. Urine is the magnetic atoms that you need to recycle into your body because they are more refined, and it's like a homeopathic tissue salt, which I take.
A conduit, right? Because the salt's going to have the silica that makes so much sense.
Yeah, is gold, and backward is Ru or Ra. It's radiation. That's what it is. Urine is backwards there for radiation because it's a blue shift. It's alkalizing. Blue is alkalizing. Red shift is acidity. Look at your pH scale. Left acid is on the left is red. On the right, like the rainbow, you've got blue, alkalinity.
Wow, and it makes so much sense, and not just, you know, the non-physical side. Like, there's just so many cases of people and stories of individuals where I had a buddy who's a big uropathy practitioner, and he was in a restaurant, like ordering, and there was this man who had to be 65, 70, and just had radiant hair. He just had like amazing hair. It wasn't white, it was dark, and my buddy was like, "Listen, bro, I gotta ask you, how do you keep your hair like that? I mean, how old are you? Like, you know, if you don't mind me asking, 65, 70?" And I think he said he was actually like 75, but he said, "All right, well, I'll tell you if you want to know, but you know, you might not be what you expect." And sure enough, he said, I've been putting urine on my scalp and my hair since I was 25, every day. And, you know, the science behind it is that it has urea in it, which we're getting in our shampoos and our conditioners from animals already. It's just isolated and then put in with fragrances and extra, you know, binding agents, things like that. But the principle of what they're trying to is doing something, is the urea. So your urea is actually going to be recognized far better by your skin, hair, and nails. And I mean, listen, for years I had to deprogram myself. So I'm active of being deeply conditioned like everyone else to think, ooh, gross. And it took me, and I have a whole way to do it. That's kind of the neat thing about going through something, is you learn a good way you can share with other people. So my first recommendation for people if they wanted to try this is get a glass of not your favorite juice, like carrot juice. If you like orange juice better, don't use orange juice. Use another one. Carrot juice is a great one, unless you really love carrot juice. So you have your cup of juice, and you get your 8 or 12 ounces of urine. First couple seconds, the last couple seconds are toxins. The rest is a designed medicine for you that your body's actually expecting you're going to put back in, so it can see what's going on with itself. So the first round of breaking the psychopathy and breaking the programming is gulp of urine, gulp of juice, gulp, 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 back and forth. Eventually, you'll be able to just drink it and splash your mouth with water, or have a glass of water. And eventually, I got to a place where I could drink it with zero gag reflex, with mental conditioning, because that's what I ultimately isolated, was this doesn't taste any different than a vitamin concentrate I would take. It really doesn't. Or some type of nutritional mineral water or something. Why am I having this reflex? It was the psychopathy, it was the psychology of, it's gross, I'm gross, it's waste, this is all gross. And so that was the core. Remember, ideologies are a virus in and of themselves. They get planted and you form realities and emotions and beliefs around them. So breaking the psychopathy, eventually I got to the place where I can fully now drink it with no chaser. There's not a trigger for it being gross. I've completely broken that psychopathy, and there's a freedom in that feels amazing, that I can tell you that you have to earn it. And now, like, whether I put in my hair, my skin, it's just, I have a different understanding of the divinity of my machine, which means because my reality and my thoughts are now experiencing that, now I can embody that. Embody your divinity until you really accept the divinity that you have, and that can come from just understanding it more. And so that became a really powerful reflection for me. And we are, my kids, as much as I've shared information from my first marriage, they have their own, programming that's coming from their mother and from the world and their friends and peers, and they don't use neuropathy practices as much as I tell them to, unless something's really dire. They'll tap in and do it, but it's not a practice that they still have conditioning with it, which is amazing because I'm their dad, and wow, they have their own process with it. But I can tell you that my partner, and even my youngest, 3, we'll have times where I would be like, do you want to, let's take your diaper off, and he's like, no, I want to keep it on. And it was like he could tell leaving this on his skin is actually good for his skin right now. It's not bad. And actually, here's something interesting, which can bring our focus to this, why is there such a dark focus on children from those that control everything? Well, from a uropathy standpoint, children's urine up until, I believe, 7 years old has high levels of stem cells and is really healing, super healing for anyone's skin at all. It's really, really powerful. Up until 7, and then there's a chemical change in the body where it stops producing the same level of stem cell content and super nutrients and trace minerals and things. So, children are a high vibration and their stem cell count is super high. And so this is, I don't want to stay on this or anything, but this is where the focus for, sadly using children to boost their energy, power, health, and wellness along their occult ritual. Like a lot of the, powerful elite that are being exposed right now, that's where this comes from, is how powerful children really are. And so in regards to uropathy, it's actually really healthy for children to do these practices, and also children come in contact with germs so much, and they're dirty. I can tell you from having boys, microbiological civilization right now. So you want to get and introduce yourself to healthy bacteria. We don't want to isolate and over-sterilize ourselves. And let's look at that word, sterilization. Like, we're afraid of a virus, and the alternative with what they're trying to implement on a mandatory level, one of the big primary components in eugenics, and I would love to touch base with you, sir, as your knowledge, your wisdom, is, I think that's one of the scary things, is the ideology of is that of eugenics, which is based off of that they are made, I think, oh, there he is. Okay, are you there? Let's see. Here. You there?
Yeah,
oh, there you are.
My mic's not muted.
Oh, okay, there you are.
Can you hear me?
I can hear you, yeah.
Oh, great. Okay. Oh,
where'd you cut out at?
Oh, gee, man, I forget now. I panicked, so I just don't even remember.
Well, I was bringing it around to eugenics, and ideology controlling beings is that they come from a better stock than the rest of the world, and ultimately their bloodline, their genetics, they come from a better stock, and that's why they're powerful and wealthy. And that they should be able to control the lower classes of humans because they come from a better genetic stock. So I'm curious, and I want to get your perspective and hear what you have to say about that, and also about the aspect of, from that mentality of them being of a better stock, and this deep perspective of 13 bloodlines, and how it's tied in to so many things, and the reveals that will be coming from it as the Great Awakening, the Great Revealing, so to speak, the Apocalypse. The thing is, the ideology that this is what they need to do. This is they have and that they're doing it for because they believe in that, and that's why astrology is a virus in itself. And now is a time for that to be revealed, and I think it's going out more than ever. And we're doing our part right now by even sharing a lot of this.
Yes, absolutely. So these entities, they are of a different frequency type. I would say they come from, we are from their source. They are missing parts of their soul through evil deeds. They are descending, we are ascending. And so they think we're entitled to treat us like this because they are possessed by these egregores which they actually create. These things were instructed that to have power you need to make demons. You have to make an entity, a construct. It's called a corporation, really. That's why there's very few corporations ruling. These corporations have got their logos, they've got their mottos, they've got their ideology. That's the word. You use the right word there. It's the one. It's an ideology. So should Bill Gates die, or Kissinger, or Soros, that agenda will still go on. And the agenda is purely based in ecclesiastical. It's the Vatican and the Pope and the Jesuit army who are the enforcers of it with their Masonic foot soldiers. And the Vatican...
I wanted to ask you about that. I wanted to ask you your thoughts on the death of the Black Pope, too. I really wanted to hear what you had to share on that.
Yeah, well, see, this is the factional war that's going on in there. He would have belonged to the wrong side now, and or he could have been on the right side. Just because they're all evil, it doesn't mean they haven't got factions of evil. It's a kingdom divided in itself. That's how evil is. It eats itself. They're going to kill themselves. They're going to fight it to the death, and they want as much carnage like they did in World War II and World War I as possible. To eliminate the big herd and cull them. So that's what the vaccinations are for. They've weaponized them, and they've got nanobots in them, and all of this will be part of the AI system. The kind of technology they want to introduce is so far advanced that we've got no idea. We will be, AI, we'll be, if we buy into the system, but we have every single opportunity and possibility of not opting and opting out. All you need to do is not consent, and that is by not answering any of their questions. The moment you answer their questions, then you are consenting. And so the best defence will be I don't answer questions, and stick with that line. And when they read out their indulgences, which are financial instruments, they turn up with their medical martial law orders and directions, and they read out to you. It's like they did in the Inquisition, which is still alive today. They would come to your door, knock on the door, and they would read out what's going on, and they would tell you. And see, this is the thing. What they're reading out to is your corporate name, the mark of the beast. So they're saying you must volunteer to auto-quarantine for 2 weeks. You must, well, first of all, must means may, and you is not you. So there's a lot that we need to learn. I've published this in many of my videos on sovereignty and how to not contract nor consent, and you never ever use the Crown copyright name, which is the surname. You always use your lawful name, which is the name that was given you. In my case, it's Santo. So I cannot use Bonashi. It's not mine. I didn't copyright it. It's a demon. It's an egregore, and they give it life by taking blood and DNA at your birth with your placenta, the place you enter, and so they dock you and give you your doctor's certificates as well, which is the birth certificate, and now you are bonded and stocked to the system. So if you don't use that system, you do not need to consent, and we are protected by the articles of the Nuremberg trials. We are absolutely, they always tell you that it's all voluntary, so you just don't volunteer. You don't refuse. Refusal is belligerence. You don't say no. You don't act like this. You have to know how to act. That's why it's very, very important to ask questions. And so you can ask, is this vaccine going to have iatrogenic reactions? And if it's going to have iatrogenic reactions, then volunteer. And they'll have to, come up with the answers, and they'll have to also their regulators as well apply to them. They're not so focused as down. See, we're right at the top of 2 hours. So you are unqualified. You do not have to limit yourself by some contracts or entering. You have the right to not volunteer. They're making it appear that it's an order, but it's not. It's an offer. And don't confuse the difference. They can't order you to do anything. They cannot. They're offering you. You need to know how to decline, but not refuse. And so all of this is all about learning. Just these few little superficial truths will not be enough to arm yourself. That you need much more grounding in sovereignty and understanding. In the Gospels, Jesus teaches how to ask questions and not enter into a contract with Pontius Pilate, and when to stay silent, and how to react with the maritime laws of admiralty, which will take you off your grounding, the earth and sovereignty and law of the land. So, Micah, I really, really thank you, and I feel like we need to do a sequel. I've got to have you back, man, because you get it, and you know how to express it and evoke many, many powerful thought forms, which I think will strengthen people and help them to equip themselves for what is to come. So I'm going to try and have you back, if you're willing, as soon as possible.
I'd love to. It's been a pleasure. And again, we're kind of just scratching the surface, and that doesn't have to be overwhelming. It can be exciting, and because you don't have to be afraid of the unknown, you can be excited. And one of my favorite phrases, and I want to leave it with everybody, is you don't know what you don't know. And that can be one to live by, because no matter, that's when we fall into a trap, is we think we get it, we think we understand, we think we, and then, you know what I mean? And you're just rolling. As you start confining yourself into a box. And that box, if you look deeper, even on the outsides of the box, it's controlled by a narrative, by those controlled the things you're dependent on you don't realize. And that's where, thank you for those Jedi word spells, ultimately, that make the difference of establishing yourself grounded in your sovereignty, establishing I know how to say the right thing. And questions is, I saw an entire video series on, and multiple times somebody saying it to the police officers, and it was crazy. It was like a spell. They just went, okay, thank you very much, and turned around and walked away. It was like they knew that phrase. If someone was to say it, that they couldn't do anything. And, no, they know the phrase. And so, and there's more. Obviously, there's a deeper aspect. Just understanding what maritime law is would be really foundational for anybody, and how it is different from the law of the land. And as soon as you do a courtroom, you enter willingly to this law, you're heavy to what they're trying to push on you. And I just thought it was beautiful. You tied it back to Christ and Pontius Pilate, and being aware of contracts you don't realize you're consenting to. I want a t-shirt line that just says, "Don't be weird." And on the back it says, "It's just the apocalypse," which in parentheses would say "Great Revealing." And I think another shirt should say, "I don't consent," and another one should say, "I don't answer questions." And I think we got a t-shirt line just right there off that. So...
Yep, call it the coronavirus insurgents fashion line,
Right.
Yeah, so, we need this insurgency of the very sovereign and anarchistic spirit of the meritocracy, which is coming and being ushered in. No more plutocracy, no more oligarchs. Meritocracy, and those who merit it will be the ones who we will, put with great oversight and help in running our beautiful sovereign nations. So, just to finish there, can we give the any information that people might want to contact you for information?
Exactly. 100%. Well, I started something in the spirit of the radio show I used to do, Esoteric Action Radio, where I do a live broadcast that goes on Facebook Live. As of now, I'm trying to see how I can expand the platforms, but every Monday, we call it Matrix Biomechanics Mondays. It's on at 11 a.m. Pacific time in California, so calculate from there. I wake up bright and early and do it at 8 a.m. over here, and we get into health and wellness and the trinity of health and wellness and proactive things we can do to empower and activate our divine immunity to thrive through these times of great changes and really stay grounded. And then Matrix Biomechanics, www.mechanics. Part of our biochemical nutrition for over 20 years. My focus has been living foods, and so I created a company called Mandala Living Foods. And we had a cafe here in Kauai for 8 months, feeding food before somebody actually lit our kitchen on fire and took us out of feeding the community, which was really sad. Because it was Hawaiian and support with the law enforcement here, kind of small farm town style. Anyways, nonetheless, we kept it going, and we created, we had a YouTube channel going for a long time, Mandala Live TV, Mandala Living Foods TV. On YouTube as well, there's a lot of recipes for things, and we're kind of cross-pollinating them into this trinity of health and wellness. And the vision is to offer 3 different programs that people can take in packages, depending on how much you want to invest in yourself, to learn how to make raw food, or learn yogic breath work, or learn how to muscular therapy on yourself. Because since we are isolated and we don't know where that's going, this is an opportunity for each one of us to train and strengthen ourselves and prepare ourselves in a way that we do have control over. You don't know what's going to happen. We don't know which way everything is going to go. I am holding space for multiple scenarios and not attached to any of them, but the one thing I can do is empower myself and activate my cellular makeup to the most optimal level to thrive through the mutation process and the great changes in whatever is thrown in my immune system, whether it be technological or pharmacological or biological. And that's what we want to offer a forum and start building an online community to support the process for. So again, I'd love to come back on. We got so much more to talk about, and it's an honor to learn some really key pieces for myself today from you. So I'm super grateful for that. And thank everyone for tuning in to the frequency.
So take care, brother, and many blessings to you, and great rewards for your great work. So thanks, listeners, as well. Please don't forget to support the station, and I will be back next week with another great guest. So thank you. Take care, everyone. Bye for now.
Aloha and Sat Nam.